though we're talking about dairy, the things that we're learning, I don't believe they're unique to dairy alone. I believe these things apply to many industries, and that we could take what we've learned in this and put it into some other context, and we would have the same lessons and the same things we could apply to those other industries. So if you're not working in dairy, and if you've never been on a dairy farm, think about them in a different context, but capture the thoughts, capture the truths that are part of this. Well, again, let me just recognize my colleague Stan Moore, who is a partner with me on this project. And also I want to recognize that we had a partner on the East Coast, Felix Soriano, who worked with us quite a bit. Now, as Ruben mentioned, on dairy farms, Latino numbers are increasing. But that's not just in the southern part of Michigan, where the temperatures are of course warm all year long, but up in the north where I am, we still see an increased number of Latinos on farms. That's not unusual now up north, where it used to be a few years ago. It was very unusual to find Latinos on farms up north. Now it's very common. The other part of that I want to recognize is it's not just large farms. The issue of labor availability affects small farms as well as large farms, and so we see them on small farms as well. And Ruben made mention of this fact that farm work is hard work. It's very demanding work. It's long, repetitive hours of work. That's no matter who you are as an employee. And it's for the owners as well, too. Farm work is difficult work. Farm work is demanding work. So as we think about the employees on farms, as we think about potential employees on farms, keep that in mind. We're talking about difficult work. Now, we mentioned this fact. The availability of Latino labor, of course, availability has decreased with increasing border war, but the availability of Latino labor was seen by dairy farmers as, wow, that's the end of my labor problems. Now I've got people stopping at the farm on a weekly basis and looking for work. I don't have to worry about how I manage employees. I don't have to even worry about turnover, because there's always a car full coming. So-and-so's cousin and brother and uncle can be here tomorrow. The problem with greater availability is that that will sometimes mask the problems in management. Because if we don't have to worry about losing employees because they're so available, if we don't have to worry about people who want to work, then we don't have to become better as managers. That's a problem. We want our dairy producers, our dairy owners, to become better as managers, and not just to manage whoever is there, but to manage people as part of a team. The project that Stan and I initiated in 2012 was to work with those dairy owners and managers, and to help them to see problems in their own management and to make recommendations back to them for managing employees by getting feedback from the employees. And so we developed a survey of employees, a survey that was administered to the employees by phone, so it was anonymous. Employees would encourage their employees to call our interviewer, our bilingual interviewer. And by the way, we had one interviewer who do all these farms, all these employees. And so they were encouraged to do this in order to get feedback for themselves. Now, understand here, that's an owner and a manager opening themselves up to constructive criticism. That's not ubiquitous across the landscape, those who are willing to do that. It's really a select group of those owners and managers who are willing to even open themselves up for that. So even as we share the results, I can't say these are representative of all dairy farms and all dairy managers. It's really representative of a select group who've identified as being willing to hear back from their employees. But even so, there's a lot we can learn. Okay, so we have gone through now 14 farms in 4 states, Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. And so employees receive a paper copy of the survey so that they understand what questions they'll be asked by the interviewer. But we encourage them actually not to put anything on the paper. Not that they want those back, because we want to maintain anonymity. We want to guarantee that whatever they say is not going to get back in any kind of form that it can be brought back against them. And so we want them to be prepared to answer questions as they're asked by the interviewer, and they get the same thing they're going to be asked on paper. We also have the owners and managers fill out a survey of what do you think your employees will say to this question? What do you think your employees will say to this question? As well as some other information that we collect from them. The farms we worked on, the 14 farms, have a total of 230 employees. So 230 employees, 14 farms, you do the math, it's higher level than I can do, but that would be somewhere above 15 employees per farm. That is higher level than I can actually do. But I would average about 15 employees per farm. And we've had 174 of those employees call in. So 76% of the employees on these farms have called in. That's great. That means that somebody has really been encouraging them to call in, and they've been willing to do that, understanding that it may make them nervous to do so. And of those, 56% were identified by our interviewer as Spanish was their preferred language, versus 44% English was their preferred language. Okay, so our interviewer identified that fact and noted it on the survey response that she would send to us. And so even though ethnicity was not the important thing, not the main thing that we were collecting to study, we were able to divide that out and to separate that out to learn what we can learn from each part of that. And so when we sort by ethnicity, our survey revealed some differences between Spanish-speaking employees and English-speaking employees, and a lot of similarities. That shouldn't be surprising, that there's both similarities and differences between those employees on dairy farms. So let's talk about one of those areas, and that is we asked employees how long they've worked on this farm. You can see that there's a significantly lower tenure of the Spanish-speaking employees on these farms across 174 employees by 2 years, less than English. Let me give you the example of one farm that we just completed here last month. 6 Hispanic employees, 4 Anglo employees. The 6 Hispanic employees, the longest one who had been there was in there 6 months. Wow. Talk about turnover. Turnover has a high impact on any industry, but certainly on the dairy industry as well. Turnover is very costly in some terms. But we also asked employees another question. Not only how long have they worked there, but how long would they want to work there? So that gives us an idea, not just how long their tenure has been, but how long is it going to be? And we give them an opportunity to rate that. A 1 equals 1 year, 2 equals 2-3 years, a 3 equals 4 to 5 years, and a 4 equals until retirement. And again, Spanish-speaking employees said, in general, that they plan to stay there less longer than Anglo employees did. And so you can see that this turnover rate is going to continue. We also asked employees how satisfied they are working in this dairy, where in a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not satisfied and 5 is very satisfied working in this dairy. You know, it's more than about getting a check. Employees want to be a part of something. They want to be satisfied. They want to have an experience working somewhere that's meaningful to them. And actually, the numbers are surprisingly good. They're satisfied. Now, maybe they're satisfied because they are getting a check on a regular basis. Maybe they're satisfied because they have a job. Maybe they're satisfied because nobody's asking them questions. And there really wasn't any difference between Spanish-speaking employees and English-speaking employees. So, on this level, we say that's a good thing. We asked employees about equal treatment. Do you feel that you are treated equally with other employees? There was no difference by ethnicity. In general, as we looked at those responses, it wasn't that one group says, no, we're not treated equally. Now, there were cases, certainly on some farms, where employees felt that there was a difference in how they were treated versus how English-speaking employees were treated. But overall, there was no difference. But I want you to understand this, that equal treatment does not necessarily mean good treatment. And even the farm that we looked at, this recent farm Those 6 Hispanic employees I told you lived in one house. They had a number of complaints about that house. And I would say that that's not good treatment of people. Of people. We asked about training. Training is essential. You may say, oh, dairy farmer, what do you need to know to milk cows, to be a lechero? To be a lechero, you just have to know how to pull teats. Or put a milker on, actually, is what we do today. Right? No, actually, the more you know about how a cow works, the more you know about how the equipment works, the better you are. The more effective you are. And so training is really important. We need to explain, yes, not only how to do the job, but why they do things. We need to explain what's important about making that work right. Employees, about the frequency of training. They told us it wasn't very frequent. If a 2 was only when they started working, and a 3 was once a year, you can see that it was less than once a year for both Spanish-speaking and English-speaking employees. The training is not very frequent on farms. So, is that because employees are not interested in learning? That'd be a good question to ask. Maybe employees are not interested in learning. Well, they were asked to rate their interest in learning. Scale of 1 to 5. 1, I already knew enough to do my job. 5, I am interested in dairy and I want to learn more. Across 174 employees, 4.78. That tells us that almost every employee says 5. I want to learn. That is incredible. Just think of the students of Michigan State University who could answer that high. I can't imagine that they would answer that high. Dairy farm employees want to learn. Does that go on tape too, by the way? Whoops.
That'll be up on YouTube soon.
Yeah. That little segment right there, pulled out.
I'll pull it out.
We asked employers what they thought their employees would answer that question. So we asked the employers, how interested do you think your employees are interested in learning? Their answer, 3.27. That is a whole magnitude of difference between 4.73 and 3.27. But let me tell you this. If you underestimate the interest of somebody in learning, maybe it's because you're underestimating the ability of somebody to learn. And that gets to the issue of prejudice about employees, whether they're Spanish-speaking or English-speaking. Maybe they're making a decision about those employees. We're going to show you a quote from an employee, a quote that came not in response to this question, a quote that came in response to a question about how familiar they are with the goals of the farm. Okay? If I share with you my goals, I'm engaging your mind. I want you to understand where I'm coming from. I want you to buy into where I'm coming from. This quote from a farm that's well managed, we thought, by friends, showed us that even there's problems. This is from a Spanish-speaking employee. All the companies usually put up charts with the company goals. But here there's nothing. We come here like donkeys to do what we're told to do. If we treat our employees as donkeys, if we consider them as donkeys, then we have not engaged their minds or valued their minds and the input that they can give us on an intellectual level. That's a tragedy. We believe that in order for employees to be full team members, they need to both know the goals and their performance against them. That means they need to be partners with us in reaching those goals. Communication. Communication is certainly an issue. And so it is something that can isolate employees from the employer and can isolate employees from each other. And by the way, overlap that isolation with isolation in the community, and then add to that isolation with isolation as a result of maybe being a fall documented worker. I don't like the term, by the way, undocumented, because they all have documents. Now, fall, that was the French word that means false. I don't know how you can use a French word in describing Hispanic employees, but that's all I knew. All right. I don't think you can call it a mal-documented worker because they're pretty good documents in most cases. They're not mal. Right? They're bien documents, but they're just not correct. Right? Maybe. Allegedly.
Right.
So add to that, and that creates isolation in the community. But here's a quote from a Hispanic employee. I just love this. The owner sometimes comes near to me and starts talking. I don't know if he's talking to me or if he's talking to himself. I don't understand English. Do we have a failure to communicate or not? Yeah, obviously. And that creates problems on farms or in any business. Now, engagement is a critical issue with employees. If you read any kind of literature about employees and about business, you will come up against employee engagement very quickly. Because employee engagement is something that people recognize as being so critical in order to get greater productivity, in order to be more profitable. Businesses that have more engaged employees are simply more profitable businesses. And Charles Contreras, as well as People First, defines an engaged employee as a connection between an employee and an employer that results in an employee giving voluntary effort. They go beyond just what they're required to do to doing something that benefits the business. They're putting their heart into this, not just their hands and their back into it, right? And that can be difficult to assess. I mean, do you say, are you an engaged employee? No, that doesn't get you answers, right? So one of the ways that we tried to gauge that was to ask this question. The question was, how frequently do you come up with ideas to improve the business, whether or not you share them? It's an open-ended question. And then we categorized the responses. We went through all the responses and categorized them into 3 categories. 3. That's a hand-eye coordination. 3 categories. We said they frequently came up with ideas, they occasionally came up with ideas, or they don't come up with ideas. So what I want to do is take you through just some of those comments in those categories. Frequent ideas. Always, and I share them. The third one. We come up with ideas to make things easy. We share them with the supervisor, and then he lets us know if we can do them. Do you understand that that sharing ideas from an employee to an employer is a gift? It is a gift to the employer. If you share an idea of how to make the business better, of how to make the business more profitable, of how to make the business succeed better, that is an absolute gift from an employee to an employer, whether it's a good idea or not. It's a gift because he was thinking of the business rather than thinking of himself or herself. And so he offers a gift of an idea. This is an employee, these are employees who are very engaged and are offering the gifts to their employer of how to have a better business. Here's ones that we rated as occasional ideas. Sometimes I have ideas and I share them with my supervisor. Okay, that's occasional. Next one, try to contribute with my ideas as much as possible, but there's not much consideration. Oh, do you think that affects the interest of employees in sharing ideas if there's not much consideration of ideas? You see, these comments not only reveal things about the employees, they reveal things about the employers as well and how they manage. And so that brings us to the third category, which we call disengaged workers. These are workers whose minds are not there. They may go physically to work, but their minds didn't go with them. They have no intention of their minds being active. And so they say, I have some ideas, and I share them, but they never consider them. I gave up on sharing ideas because they never do anything with my ideas. Do you see how the employer has shut down the engagement of the employee? By the way, these comments are not just from Hispanic workers. These are from Hispanic and Anglo workers. But we can separate out. And when we do that, we find that Hispanic workers, Spanish-speaking workers, more disengaged than English-speaking workers. Greater disengagement of the Spanish-speaking employees. So then the question arises, is that cultural or is it management related? That'd be a good question. Because if it's cultural, it's not my fault. It's their fault. So in order to get at that, we looked at individual farms. Because on an individual farm then, you would see the same thing carried through every farm because they manage all their employees the same. and it would be the same culture across those farms. That's the variation between farm A and farm F. 6 farms here, and the N equals the number of Hispanic workers, of the level of disengagement or the level of very engaged. And so when you look at the individual farms, it drove us to the conclusion that employee engagement is primarily a function of employee management. Employee management having the greatest impact on employee engagement. And what we want our dairy producers to do is to become better employee managers, better at understanding their employees and better at managing those employees. And so we believe that good employee management involves all employees as team members. We believe that good employee management values the minds of employees, and that it communicates goals and performance standards. It provides meaningful and positive feedback, and it treats employees with respect and fairness. One of the things that we used in another presentation was facilitates human living. Treat people as people with respect, on the job and off the job. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today.